Good evening, everybody that's watching. Tonight's class, as always, is in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, and the Shama should have an elevation. Okay, so I'm going to start with a joke. I need a joke. I need a little Chaim too, but the joke will. What? So, let's give me a good name. Chaim is dying. He's on his deathbed, and all of his kids are gathered around to just say pay their last respects. They're all around their father's bedside. He looks around and he says, "Goldie, his wife, you're here?" He says, "Yes, I'm here. Relax, I'm here." She's holding his hand. He says, "His oldest son, Shlomo, you're here?" She says, "Yes, Father, I'm here with you." He calls, "Next son, Beryl, you're here?" "Yes, I'm here." "Steve, you're here?" Whatever. He goes around each one of his kids. Every one of his kids is there by his bedside. He finally finishes calling each one of his kids. So he says, "If you're all sitting here with me at my bedside, who's watching the store?"
Mama is.
They're all watching, they're all by the bedside. They're all there by the bedside, no one's watching the store. So, we're going to talk today about that moment of transition, of passing, when the person is dying, and they're worried about who's going to watch the store. Okay? This week's Torah reading, we have a very, very powerful story. Now, it's easy to miss how powerful the story is, because it's not externally dramatic. Like last week we talked about a talking donkey. You can't miss the drama of a talking donkey. It pops out at your eyes. Today we're going to read a story, and again, I did have a source sheet, but you're going to have to believe me that it's what I'll read it. I'll tell you the story, and it's basically it's a few verses. It doesn't seem highly dramatic or highly, emotionally charged, but actually, if you understand the context and you understand the background to this dialogue, it's actually quite a emotional story. What am I talking about? So let me give you a little bit of introduction. This week's parasha is the parasha Pinchas. The first part of the Torah. I'll tell you actually. Should I say the story first, or should I give you the context first? Which way should we do this? First, the story. The story, then I'll give you the context. Okay, I'll tell you the story first. So in this week's parasha is chapter number. Where are we? Chapter 27. Hashem says to Moshe, "Go up. Tahar ha'avarim hazeh, go up to this mountain, and on this mountain, the mount of the Avarite mountains, there you'll be able to see the land of Israel that I'm going to be giving to the Jewish people. And after that, you will be gathered to your people, and you will pass just as your brother Aharon had passed." Now, if you remember, when Aaron died, he died by the kiss of God. God, so to say, metaphorically kissed him, and he died a very, very spiritual, very peaceful, beautiful death. And God is now, and when Moshe saw his brother experiencing the death, Moses prayed and said to God, "I too want to die in such a peaceful, spiritual, holy way." And God said, "I'm going to fulfill your request, and you too will die like your brother died." After that, verse 15, chapter 27, Moshe spoke to God saying, "O God, who knows the thoughts of everyone, Keil Elokei Haruchas, the God that knows the thoughts of everyone, I'm asking that you should appoint somebody capable over the congregation, somebody who will go out courageously to war in front of the Jewish people and will return back from the war," meaning a true leader is someone that goes out with the people, doesn't stay behind. Some leaders, they send everyone else out and they stay, in safety. A real leader is someone who goes out before and goes back with them. Someone who will lead them and bring them back, so God's congregation will not be like a sheep, asher ein lahem ro'eh, that have no shepherd. That's Moshe's concern, Moshe's request to God. Please, O God of the spirits. And Rashi tells us that why is he O God of spirits? Meaning you understand how each person is a unique, individual kind of person with their own different needs, etc. Appoint a person who can understand the mind of all the different kinds of Jews, all the different kinds of human beings that will be part of their responsibility, and appoint someone who will lead the people, who will be with the people, so the Jewish people should not be like a sheep that have no shepherd. Hashem says to Moshe, "I agree, good idea. Kach lechas Yehoshua ben Nun, take for yourself Joshua, the son of Nun, a man asher ruach bo, a man upon whom the Spirit is there." Meaning he's able, as Rashi explains, he's able to relate to and understand the mind and the individual needs and personality and style and weaknesses and of each individual person. V'samachta es yadcha alav, and you shall do smicha. You shall place your hand upon him to transfer the leadership from you to him. Not only should you do smicha, should you put your hand on him to show that you are formally transferring the leadership from you to him. In addition, you shall stand him up. You should instruct him in the presence of Elazar, the high priest. You want to make sure people know that you appointed him. Sometimes people on their deathbed, they give certain gifts, responsibilities, but nobody else knows about it. And then afterwards, give them a big fight. It's not clear who said what was really happened. So stand before Elazar, the high priest, v'lifnei kol ha'edim, before all of the congregation, and you shall teach words into him, and you shall command him in their presence. They should see how you're transferring this leadership. And you shall put a little bit of your glory or of your splendor upon him, in order that all the Jewish people will listen and accept and respect the authority of Joshua as next leader after you pass away. And then the next verse tells us, in addition to commanding him in the presence of the Jewish people, besides for that, you should also have him ask a question of the Urim V'Tumim in the presence of Elazar the high priest. What is the Urim V'Tumim? The Urim V'Tumim was the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Only the king or the leader of the Jewish people was allowed to use this for asking for things that they needed. So you should use this to ask. He should be the one to stand before the high priest, asking a question of God via the medium of the breastplate that would light up, the different stones would light up, and the voice would emanate from the fold of the fabric. We had a class on this. The fold, the fabric was like a double thing that folded up, and inside there was a paper with God's name. A voice would emanate from there, and this way all of the Jewish people would see how I am responding to him. V'al piv yetzu, v'al piv yevayu. And based on that authority, and we'll see, based on his mouth, the Jews will go out to war, they will come back from war, and he will lead him and all the Jews that will be with him. And then the story ends. Vayas Moshe kashatziv Hashem also. Moshe did exactly as God had commanded him. He takes Yehoshua, he stands him up before Elazar, who is then the high priest, when Aaron already passed away, and he stands him up in front of the entire congregation of Israel so everyone can see clearly how he's transferring the leadership from him to Yehoshua before he dies. Vayismech etz yadav alav, he rests his hands, plural, upon him. If you notice, God had told him, you shall place your hand upon him. V'samachta es yadcha, your hand. And Moshe put his hands, plural, both hands on him. He was even more, effusive and more giving in this transfer of leadership. He put both hands upon the head of Joshua, both hands on his head, and he commands him, exactly as God spoke, in the hands of Moshe. That is the end of the chapter, the end of the story. Side note, till today, when the rabbi becomes ordained as a rabbi, the Hebrew word for ordination is smicha, right? God willing, when they also get smicha. The word smicha comes from this story that I just mentioned to you now, which literally means resting. That's what the word means. Smicha literally means resting your hands upon. And as long as we had the temple, we had the men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset Hagedolah, the way that the Jewish people were appointed as the leaders of the Jewish people was that one leader would rest their hands, literally do a smicha upon the new appointee, and that's how it continued. Today we don't do an actual resting of hands. Today it's a tests plural, and a certificate, and a picture, but yeah. That's what I just explained. Just 1 second. I have smicha. No one rested their hands. I actually have 6 rabbis that are assigned to my smicha. None of the 6 rabbis that officially ordained me actually put their hands on my head. But they tested me on different parts of the Shulchan Aruch. They tested me. I'm just clarifying that today we say that a rabbi got smicha, the root of that word, that expression, is taken from God telling Moshe to rest his hands, from the word smicha, to rest his hands on the head of Joshua, and that was the act through which Moshe transferred leadership, or invested the authority as a leader into Joshua. Joshua didn't take any tests. He didn't have to write a whole test. He didn't have to study any books of Jewish law. You know what I'm saying? He rested his hands, and that's how rabbis were ordained during the times of the temple, when there was an actual Sanhedrin. After the Sanhedrin stopped, the formal smicha of resting hands also stopped, and today is just a term that we use for having passed the test and being certified or ordained. It's a side note. Just wanted to point it out.
So when you do the prayer for your child on Friday night, and you put your hand on his head,
that is the word smicha actually, but it doesn't have the connotation of making them a rabbi. You understand? Yeah. But that is exactly what the word means. You're resting your hands. It's exactly what Moshe did. He rested his hands on the head of Joshua. That's the story. Not especially dramatic on the outside, right? As I said, you can read the story. Okay. Moshe asks God, we need a new leader. A man has the Spirit of God upon him who can relate to each and every person on their own level. God says, great idea. Take Joshua, the one that's been by your side, make him the new leader, and stand him up so everyone can see. Moshe does it, and they live happily ever after. There's no politics, no one argues with it, everyone accepts it. It's unique anomaly, right? Everyone agrees who should be the next leader. Everyone's on the same page. That's the end of the story. So where's the drama of this story? And also, obviously, where's the lesson for us in this story? So where's the drama? Where's the emotion? And what lesson can we take? So, the back part of the story now. The context, the human aspect of the story is as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu actually has two sons. Remember that? He married a woman called Tzipporah. He ran away to Midian. He had a wife and he has kids. Like anyway, he has kids. Two sons. The names are Gershom and Elazar. And they are his sons, who obviously Moshe tries to educate to be holy, righteous people. There's no doubt that Moshe cared deeply for the spiritual maturity, the spiritual level of his children, that they should become great, holy people. Right? I'm sure of that. It's a challenge. Raising children is absolutely a challenge. In no way am I saying that it's not a challenge, but obviously it's a challenge. And Moshe, we're not going to get into if Moshe succeeded or not in that challenge. It's a good question. I don't know if I'm authorized or qualified to talk about. The Torah says very little about Gershom and Elazar. I have to tell you, besides telling us that they were born and that they were there, we know basically nothing about them. Not good, not bad, so it's very hard to even say who they were. We don't know a lot. However, Moshe obviously loves his kids. Right? He's a father. He loves his kids. That's normal human behavior. What happens in this parsha? The beginning of the parsha, the first story in the book of Pinchas, is about Pinchas. Pinchas is a man that was from the family of the Levites, but he himself had never become a Levite. He was born before it became hereditary to be a Levite. He was not part of the biological children of Aaron. He's not a Levite until the whole story where he stops the plague by killing Zimri, who was committing a terrible crime. A different story. We've done a class on Pinchas as well. We've talked about this story. It's all on YouTube. But after he stops the plague, God says some very powerful words about Pinchas. But what I want to talk about is he says, I'm giving him the bris kunas olam. I'm giving him the eternal covenant, the priesthood, for him and for his descendants after him. So Pinchas is not only being rewarded by God that he becomes a priest. The promise of God that he should be a priest is for him, for him and for his children afterwards, a bris kuhunas olam, an eternal statute, eternal covenant of the priesthood. We see here a clear story of a legacy being passed down from a father earning something and being able to give that to his children. What's the next story in Pinchas? It's the story of the census. After the plague stopped, when Pinchas stopped, God says to Moshe, you're about to die, and we need to have a census, just like when you hire, let's say, a shepherd, and you entrust him with 1,000 sheep. So you count the sheep at the beginning of his career, beginning of his job, And now when he retires and he's returning them, once again, you have to count the sheep and see what he has left. So too, when Moshe took the Jews out of Egypt, God had a census done of the Jewish people to see how many Jews there were. And now that Moshe is about to pass away, he's about to transfer the leadership to the next generation, they're going into Israel. So again, there's a census to see how many Jews are left that Moshe is giving to go into Israel.
So Rabbi, why then you could count, and now we can count? We're not allowed to count.
We don't count direct. You count with a half shekel. That's another. But this census that happens now at the end of the 40 years in the desert is different than all of the other censuses that took place in Jewish history, or at least until now. Why is it different? Anybody know? How is this census different than the other ones that happened at the beginning of the 40 years? In every other census we find in the Torah just tells us a number of able-bodied men for fighting age of each tribe. So over the age of 20, from the tribe of Reuben was X amount, Shimon X amount, Levi, etc. Just gives us the numbers. No mention of names or of families. Here, this census is different. Because this census is going to be used to divide the land of Israel. And the division of the land of Israel was not only based on the number of people per tribe, it was also based upon each family. So the tribe got a certain territory. That territorial piece of land was divided to the families, and then each family divided their family's territory amongst the members of the family. That's how it was divided. So the tribes get a piece, but then each family has their family, inheritance. So it's a little complicated. I'm not going to get into the specifics because it might confuse some of the people here or watching. Everyone here is very smart, but it's just very complex to understand how the families are divided based on the number of people, based on the family. But the point is, the division happened based on the number of based on each family. So when the Torah does a census here in this week's Torah reading, the Torah actually relists the names of the members of each tribe that went down to Egypt from Israel, that became the heads of the families. So we know which families got family inheritances. So here we see, again, very clearly the idea of legacy. Of each family passing on to their family the family plot, the family inheritance that becomes their family's name. And that leads us to the third story in the parsha, which is directly related to what we just talked about, which is 5 girls, the 5 daughters of Tzlafchad, who are from the tribe of Menashe. And Tzlafchad is one of the families that are mentioned in the tribe of Menashe, but Tzlafchad had only daughters and no sons. And they say, hold on a second. There's a family piece over here, but we're not going to get it because our father had no sons, only daughters. And up until that point in legal law at the time, only men inherited land. Women were not landowners. And therefore, in the bigger family portion, our family will lose out and our father's name will be lost forever. And in fact, if you look at the very specific language of the request of these daughters of Tzlafchad, these 5 very heroic, righteous women that are praised in the Torah, when they come before Moshe and Aaron and Elazar, demanding that they should get an inheritance together with their uncles or with their cousins, their male cousins, they say, our father died in the desert and he had no sons. Lama yigara shem avinu mitoch mishpachto. Listen to those words. I'll translate. Why should our father's name be missed out from his family because he had no sons? Tnu lanu achuza, give us also an inheritance amongst the inheritance of our father's brothers. Listen to those words. What's their request? What are they arguing for Moshe? Not just we want land. We want our father's name to continue. Lama yigara shem avinu mitoch mishpachto. Why should the name of our father, the name of our family, the name of our lineage be lost out just because our father had girls and no boys? We also want an inheritance, not because we want the money. We want to keep the name of the family alive. And of course, what happens? What's the end of that story? This was last year's class. Moshe goes to God and God says, Cain, Bnos, Slavchadoros. The daughters of Slavchad are speaking properly and correctly, which last class we talked about this at great length. The fact that God is coming and saying the women are right, listen to the women, what they're saying is good. We're going to change the law. We're going to now teach the law on the merit of these women, that if there's no sons, even daughters inherit, etc., etc. And these 5 daughters become the very first female landowners in all of human history. First in history of mankind. Forget about Judaism. The first ladies to own land are these 5 daughters that stood up to Moshe, and they were given an inheritance in the family plot. But why am I sharing all these stories? Besides that, it's an amazing story about the daughters of Slavchad, and we've talked about it. Moshe Rabbeinu is watching all this take place. Moshe Rabbeinu is watching Pinchas earn an eternal legacy not only for him, but for his children after him. He's watching a census taking place where the land of Israel is being divided to families based on the family, the fathers based on the families. And then he sees how these girls come and say, our father should also live on. And God agrees. And Moshe Rabbeinu stops to think to himself for a moment. What about my legacy? Now this is not written in the text of the Chumash. As I said, you can miss this whole story. But there is such an emotional moment at this juncture. Moshe is about to die. His entire life has been dedicated to the Jewish people. His entire life has been dedicated to the nation, his divine shlichut, his divine mission to teach the Jews Torah. And now he says to himself, what about my own kids? What will be with my biological children? Will they be able to continue my place? It's a very powerful moment. And so Moshe comes before God and asks God, let me have the nachas. My brother Aaron, he passed away. And what did Aaron see before he passed away? His son Elazar was wearing the clothing of the high priest. He saw how he got undressed and his son got dressed. To have that nachas, to see your son standing with the clothing of the high priest, to see him following in your footsteps, it's tremendous. And Moshe is not getting that. Moshe is not getting that. And so Moshe turns to God and says to God, in between the lines here, says, what about my own sons? I want my own children to carry on my legacy. I want my own kids to be part of the future of the Jewish people, to have a place in the story of history, to have a place in the identity of the story of our people. And what does God say to him? No. God says to Moshe, I have someone else in mind. Kach lecha Yehoshua ben Nun. Take for yourself Joshua. You know who he is. And place him in front of you and command him and put your hands on him and let him stand before Elazar and to speak to the Urim v'Tumim. And he will be the one to carry on your legacy, not your biological children. Not your own natural legacy, but it'll be Joshua instead. So who is Joshua? Who is Yehoshua? And what does he do to deserve to be the one that carries on the torch of Moshe? Yeah. So what does he do? You're right. What you're saying is 100% correct. You're 100% right. What Karina says is right. But let's read it in Rashi. So Rashi tells us, and again, fireworks. So Rashi tells us, just tell you outside. Rashi tells us, which Rashi was it? Here. You remember Yehoshua, God says to Moshe. He's the one who had never left your side, exactly as Karina said. He is the one who stayed early in the Beis Medrash. Well, I want to find the words. 1 second. Here, take the one that you know, the one that you already got close to. You shall give to him from your own glory. can't find let me see the words here. Oh, here we go. So Kivan Sheshama Moshe, here's a Rashi. Once Moshe heard that Hashem said to the daughters of Slavchad that you can inherit your father's land, he said, Higiya Shah. It has come the time. What I'm saying to you is not my own interpretation. It's in Rashi. Higiya Shah. She'etva tzarchei, that I should demand my own needs. Never before has Moshe asked for himself. Until now, Moshe's only asked for his people. Has come the time I should get personal. She'yishu b'ni es gdulasi, my children should inherit my greatness. Amalek Kadosh Baruch Hu, so Hashem says to him, Lo kach also b'machshava lefanai. This is not what came up in my thoughts. It's not what I have in mind. It's not my plan. Kedai Yehoshua, worthy is Joshua to take the schar, the reward of all the years that he served you. Shalei mosh mitecha oil, he never left the side of your tent as Karina said. Zeh sha'amar, this is what it says in the verse, the one that guards the figs will be the one to come and eat it at the end. He was on the guard of the figs, therefore gets the reward of eating it at the end. So what's the story of Joshua never leaving the tent? So if you go all the way back to the story of Moshe going up the mountain, right? So Moshe goes up the mountain. Again, if we had the source sheet, you would have seen the verses yourself inside. I'm going all the way to the parsha in the book of Exodus, chapter 24. So Hashem says to Moshe, come up to the mountain. And then what happens? Verse 13 says the following words. Vayakam Moshe gets up. The Yehoshua Misharsai, and Joshua his servant, his attendant. Vayal Moshe el Har Elokim, and Moshe goes up to the mountain of God. And to his elders, he says, you stay over here, you're in charge. And then Moshe goes up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. The chapter ends, Moshe went inside the cloud, 40 days, 40 nights. Why does the Torah tell us that Moshe and Joshua went up to the mountain of God if Joshua didn't go up the mountain? Just a few verses later, it says very clearly that Moshe went up the mountain into the cloud and he stayed there for 40 days and 40 nights. But yet verse 13, again, you'll trust me, that's black and white in the text. It says in the Torah, in the book of Exodus, chapter 24, verse 13, that Moshe and Yehoshua both went up the mountain. So Rashi tells us, I don't know, Lo yadaiti mativ shel Yehoshua kan. The Torah has never told us anything about Joshua until this moment. This is the very first time we are ever introduced to a person called Yehoshua. First time. By the way, I just realized this second, he's called Yehoshua. It's long before the story of the spies. Just realized, I don't know, I have to do some homework on that. Just popped in my head. By the way, this is the first time, says Rashi, we're introduced to this person. I don't know who he is. I say, says Rashi, that he is the most loyal student of his teacher that accompanies his master until the very border of the mountain, saying, until Moshe says to me, you're not allowed to go any further, you have to stay over here. And he says, I will stay right over here. And he sets up his tent over there. Yeshua natasham ahalai. Yeshua sets up his tent at the foot of the mountain. V'nisakim sham kol mem yoim. And he stays there for 40 days. And that's why you find that when Moshe came down the mountain, I'm still quoting from Rashi, I'm just saying it outside. When Moshe came down the mountain at the end of 40 days, what happens? You know what happens? If you skip ahead a few chapters, when Moshe comes down the mountain, what are the Jewish people doing? They're sinning and they're partying and they're having an orgy and they're worshipping idols. All kinds of sins are happening when the Jews worship the golden calf. So Moshe comes down the mountain, and the verse tells us in chapter 33, chapter 32. So Hashem says, he comes down, Yishma Yeshua, verse 17, and Joshua hears the Kol Ha'am, the noise, the voice of the people shouting. He says to Moshe, Kol Ha'am Bereya, it says to Moshe, Kol Muhammad Machan, I hear a voice of war in the camp. And Moshe tells his nice innocent student, the voice you hear is not a voice of gvura, it's not a voice of victory, it's not a voice of defeat, of desperation, it's a voice of blasphemy that I hear. The point is, Why is Joshua saying to Moshe, I hear a sound of war? It wasn't a war. It was a sound of idol worship. Joshua didn't know. Here Rashi says it to us explicitly, black and white. Joshua followed his teacher. He wouldn't leave his teacher's side. So much so, they came to the very, very foot of the mountain. Everyone else stayed back. Goodbye, Moshe. We'll see you later. Have a safe trip. Right? They didn't go anywhere. Yeshua couldn't bear to be separated from his teacher. And because of that, he's walking together with Moshe step by step. He won't leave his teacher's side for a moment until they're already going up to the mountain. And Moshe says to Joshua, until here you're allowed to go. Past here is already the cloud. Here you can go. Now you might think, okay, he's a good student. He accompanied his teacher up to the limit to where he's allowed to go. Now go back home. Now I don't know if Joshua was married at the time, not married at the time. Probably not, because he married Rachel. So he probably was a single man. He was still a yeshiva student, although he wasn't young. He was single. He took his tent, and he slept there. And he ate there. And he lived there. By the way, you want something fascinating? So how did he eat for 40 days and 40 nights, living on the mountain? Moshe was on the mountain, didn't eat for 40 days, 40 nights. It says it was a miracle. He was like the angels. He didn't eat. He literally didn't eat for 40 days, 40 nights. It was a miracle. He was like an angel. He didn't eat food. But Joshua was not an angel. So what did he eat for 40 days and 40 nights? Says the Gemara, thinking Yevamis, that the man fell on the mountain just for him. The bread from heaven, the manna from heaven, God did a miracle, and there was bread from heaven falling special for him on Mount Sinai, not in the camp. The camp is over here, wherever the camp is. There on the mountain, outside the camp. A special delivery of man, bread from heaven, for 40 days, came to him on the side of the mountain, where he was camped, waiting for Moshe to return. Yeah. Can you imagine a special miracle? For 40 days, 40 miracles happened for Joshua, and he eats his bread, and he sits there all alone. No one else is there. He's waiting to see Moshe come back down the mountain. And therefore, when the whole story of the golden calf happens, and Kalev tries and whatever, and Kalev tries to stop them, and he gets stoned to death, and the whole story, he's oblivious. He's on the mountain. He's as close to Moshe as could possibly be without violating the law and going too close into the cloud of glory. That's Joshua. If you want a modern day example of that, imagine you're a puppy that loves you very, very much, right? And it's waiting by the front door, just waiting and waiting for its master to come home. That's true loyalty, true devotion. They have nothing else to do, and they sit there by the door, and they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and the moment you come home, they're there to jump on you and to slobber you, so happy to see you. That's what Yehoshua was, lahavdil. Elef al chavdal, not to compare Joshua in any way to a pet waiting for its master, but the same idea that Joshua was sitting there with a loyalty and an absolute commitment and devotion that he was sitting there by the door, sitting at the bottom of the mountain, waiting for Moshe to come back down the mountain. You know what the Medrash says? Why did Joshua merit to have become the next teacher of the Jewish people? Not because he was the best student in the class. Not because he was the best student. But because he was the first one to show up to the yeshiva in the morning. He would come early to set up. He would come take out the books, put out the chairs. He would come before class started. He was there setting up. And he was the last to leave. After everyone left, he would stay to tidy up. He was there first. He was on to open up. And he was on to lock up at night. He was there first. He left last. And because of that, therefore, that's when he merited to become the next teacher to the Jewish people.
So he qualified to be the leader because he was loyal?
Yeah.
Not because he knew anything, not because...
Well, obviously he learned.
My dog
obviously,
waited for me at the door, but I wouldn't...
That's what's enough to...
I wouldn't trust him with the key.
So... What? So Moses' children also showed up to the yeshiva. This is what the Medrash says. Moshe's children also came to the yeshiva. But guess what? They sauntered in, they sat down, they had a cup of coffee, they listened to the class, they shared notes. They weren't dedicated with heart and soul. Here's the point. It's not just blind loyalty. Yeshua was obviously a very wise man. Yeshua was a teacher of Torah. He was a leader of the Jewish people. He was chosen by God to be the next teacher and leader of the Jews. So he was obviously qualified. Not just that he was loyal. But what made Yeshua stand out, what made Yeshua be chosen by God to be the one to carry on the leadership of Moses, and not the children of Moses, who were also smart people, and who were also good students, and who also came to the yeshiva, is the fact that Yehoshua was the one that came early to your house of assembly to arrange the benches and spread out the mats. And since he served Moses with all of his might, says the Medrash, he is the one who is worthy of serving of Israel. Here's the point. Here's the point. Yeshua is unique, not in that he was smart. There were many princes and there were many smart people. There were a lot of students, there were a lot of elders, there were 70 elders. And there were others that had prophecy. Hold on, made the other 70 elders. Aaron, Elazar, other, there were Kaleb and Yefunah, there were other, Pinchas, Nachshon ben Aminadav. There were other heroes living amongst the Jewish people. Joshua wasn't the only one. Joshua's uniqueness was his commitment, was his dedication. In Hebrew, we call it hasmada. You know what hasmada means? What does hasmada mean? How would you translate hasmada in English? Hatmada. Consistency. It's when someone's very studious. When it comes to the word tamid, tamid means always. So hasmada means someone that's constantly learning, constantly working, constantly. You come to yeshiva no matter what time in the morning or night, he was there learning.
Would you say that's like a similar trait like Moshe Rabbeinu had when he picked up the sheep, like the dedication that he had that God had chosen to be Moshe?
No, so there's a difference. When Moshe Rabbeinu was walking, he saw the sheep was thirsty, and he picked up the sheep and he said, "Oh, sheep, you ran so far to get water, you must be tired, let me carry you back to the flock." That was love and that was care. Moshe was a man of love. Not to say Yeshua didn't have love, but the unique quality of Joshua was his absolute dedication, consistent dedication. Love is, I see you need something, so I'll go out of my way, I'll sacrifice everything I have for you. That's love. Commitment and dedication is every single day. Whether or not there's someone that notices or doesn't notice, whether someone's there to take point and to give you a little sticker afterwards and give you a star, or if no one's looking and no one sees. No one saw Joshua sitting at the foot of the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. No one saw. He was all by himself. He could have come back 39 days later. Moshe said, I'm going for 40 days. If you wanted to be the first one to greet Moshe, you could have gone home for 39 days and come back on the 40th. He never left. He never left. And that's what's unique about Joshua. Not his intellectual abilities, not his spirituality. He had all of them. I'm not saying he didn't have them. But what made him be the choice, as Rashi tells us, the reason why God says, this is the one that you recognize, this is the one that should merit it, because the one that guards the fig tree is the one that will eat the figs. The one that has proven the most loyalty, the most commitment, the most dedication to the study of Torah, they're going to merit to be the ones to continue teaching the Torah. The ones that are willing to work for Torah, to toil for Torah, to come early and to stay late for Torah. That's the person that's going to be the teacher, the continuation of the Torah. Okay. Now, there's a lot more to the story of Joshua. Joshua, one of the 12 spies. Yeah, you have a question?
I do. I have a question. I was thinking about him waiting for the 40 days. He knew that Moshe was going to come down in 40 days. But he wasn't studying Torah there. He was just waiting. I was wondering why he didn't go back and study.
Who says he wasn't studying? He only wanted to study from his teacher, though. He was studying by himself. He was reviewing. But to study without his teacher, to him wasn't studying. So he was waiting. There was a loyalty here. If it's only... So I'm going to repeat the question. The question is, if he wanted to learn Torah, he should have gone back to the yeshiva for 39 days and then come back to study on the 40th day. So if it was only about his own intellectual, curiosity and own intellectual pursuit of more wisdom, So then you're probably right. He probably intellectually would have been better off going back to the yeshiva. But it wasn't about intellectual satisfaction. It was about serving God. It was about serving God and serving and receiving from his teacher. In order to do that, he had to be near his teacher. Understand? The point is not that he knew how to learn. The point is the loyalty. His kids, Moshe's kids didn't have that loyalty. Joshua had. Now, Joshua happened to become a great person. Joshua, one of the 12 spies, we know that. Joshua ends up marrying Rachav. We have limited time, but he marries Rachav, which is an interesting story. Rachav, when the spies went to the land of Israel the second time, they
Hide by her.
yeah, and he ends up marrying Rachav, was the woman that they helped the spies escape, and she tied a red string on her. She was a convert. She was a Canaanite, and she converted. And that's who Joshua marries. And then, of course, you have the wars he fought. The war of Jericho, where miraculously they circled the city 7 times, and then the walls came down. You have the story of Achan by Ai, where Achan was not supposed to take any of the spoils, and he did, and Joshua found out. But then we have the most famous story. What's the most famous story? In Givon. In Givon, what does Joshua do in Givon? He stops the sun. They're fighting a war, and he sees that the war is going well, and the people are, the enemy is escaping, and once it gets dark, they won't be able to find them anymore.
Right.
So Joshua holds up his hand and he commands the sun to stop. He says, Shemesh, Shemesh giving doim. Says the sun, be quiet, because the sun was praising God from the setting in the west to bow down and prostrate before God. Joshua is holy enough to stop the sun. You understand what I'm saying? We're talking about a pretty holy guy. He's not just a loyal puppy waiting by the door. He's able to stop the sun. It's a pretty cool miracle. Very few people in history. One, I don't want to say anything off without being 100% sure. But he stopped the sun. He was a very special person. But his greatness, the reason why God chose him, is because of his commitment and his dedication to learning no matter what. And there's many medrashes that talk about the idea that he got the reward to be the teacher of the Jewish people because of how much effort he put into studying. So here's what I would say is a takeaway for us. Yeshua, when he was born, who was he? Nobody. He was actually Hosea. He was Hosea. But that's not he was a nobody. He comes from the family of Nun. No one knows if he's not from an illustrious tribe. He's not from an illustrious family. His father was not a rabbi. He wasn't from any special, spiritual, important, well-connected family. Where did he come from? Nowhere. And if he would have been a regular student, he would remain a nobody. Yet Yeshua becomes the biggest somebody of his generation. Yeshua becomes the greatest leader of his generation. You know why? Because he was dedicated. And he was committed. And because of his commitment, he was able to become greater than Moshe's own children. He was able to become greater than any other Jew of his generation. Because of how much he was willing to dedicate and to sacrifice, because of his loyalty and his commitment to the study of Torah, and to his teacher, to the teacher of Torah, to Moshe. You know, when people think, yeah, you were born religious, you're born to a family of rabbis, you're whatever. I wasn't born this way. I don't come from a Hasidic family. I don't come from a family of scholars and all that. So I don't have a chance of becoming the next leader of the Jewish people. I don't have a chance of becoming a scholar or a rabbi or someone influential or somebody important because I'm just from the family of Nun. From a regular no-name family. Nun, no-name family. From a no-name family. What do we learn from Joshua? Even though he wasn't born to a family of rabbis, and even though he wasn't born to this illustrious, important group, because he was committed, he became the next leader of the Jewish people. I wasn't going to say that, but I was thinking of the story of Akiva. Hillel. who was a very, very poor man. So poor he couldn't afford the entrance fee to study in the yeshiva. He came to Israel and he wanted to go study in the yeshiva. They would charge $1 or admission, whatever, to pay for the heat and pay for the food and the refreshments. And he didn't have it. Exactly. So what did he do? He climbed up on the roof to listen to the Torah through the skylight. He was so engrossed in listening to the Torah that was being taught, as he's listening through the skylight, the snow, he was a woodcutter, but there was snow and he couldn't go cut wood. The snow was falling on top of him, but he didn't care. He was listening to the class. Until his entire body was covered in snow. In the meantime, they're sitting down in the yeshiva, they're studying, and it's getting dark. The snow is falling, but the skylight is blocked. And they look up, someone looks up and says, why is it looks like it's so dark? They look up, and they see the image of a man, of a body, lying on the skylight. And of course, they go up to the roof, and they dig off the snow, and they see Hillel is frozen, near death. He's so cold, frozen under the snow. They warm him up. And they say, because you showed such loyalty and such dedication to learning, you get a free pass to come to the yeshiva. And Hillel becomes one of the greatest sages of the Jewish people. There were many great rabbis in the time of Hillel. But Hillel didn't come from an important family either. But Hillel wanted to learn so badly. He had such loyalty, such commitment, such dedication. He was not willing to lie in the snow. He was oblivious to the snow because of how much he wanted and yearned the words of Torah. Joshua didn't sacrifice by living 40 days on the side of the mountain. All he cared about was his teacher. That's all that mattered to him. And because he was so dedicated to his learning, it's all he did day and night. That becomes his future. The only examples there are in Judaism of great people that weren't born great people. They weren't born to a family of rabbis. People that weren't even born Jewish. And yet, because of their effort, because of their willingness to sacrifice and their loyalty, not just that they sacrificed, not just that they were willing to sacrifice. They were committed day in, day out, every single morning. There was never a day when they took off. There was never a day when they slacked off. They became some of the greatest people. I'll give you a modern day example. A modern day example? There was a rabbi who passed away 2 years ago. Now it's coming up to his yard site. Not last year, sorry, not 2 years ago. It's coming up to his yard site. Rabbi Adin, 2 years ago. Rabbi Adin Even Yisrael. Rabbi Steinsaltz. Heard of Rabbi Steinsaltz? Adin Steinsaltz, Adin Even Yisrael? Even Yisrael. I have it's on my phone, it's whatever. My phone's in front of me. He was born in just read through his biography today. He's one of the greatest rabbis of the 21st century. Undoubtedly, one of the greatest rabbis. He actually translated the entire Bavli, the entire Talmud, into Hebrew. Since Rashi, or Shlomo Yitzchak, lived in the 12th century, there's not been another person that has been able to translate the entire Talmud until this Rabbi Steinsaltz. He's written over 60 books on Judaism, aside from the Talmud. He wrote a 9-volume book of explanation on the Tanya. He wrote many, many books of Kabbalah, of Hasidus. He translated the entire Talmud. He wrote a translation on the entire Nach. Yeah, but on the Nach, commentary. He wrote unbelievable amounts of work. He was a teacher to some of the greatest people in Israel. I was reading today, even though there was an elite society in Israel of scholars, of which they met every week. President Shazar and professors and some of the greatest minds of Israeli society had a society of intellectuals that studied Hasidus and Kabbalah together. He was a teacher, the youngest of the group. A tremendous scholar. For a man to translate the entire Talmud Bavli, you're talking about a project he started in the 60s and he completed in the year 2010. 50-year project. 50 years. Something like that. Do you know who his parents were? They were Marxist Zionists. Secular. Not just secular, deliberately secular. Ideologically secular. There's people that are secular because they don't know. There's people that are ideologically secular. He grew up, his grandmother lit Shabbos candles. His mother wouldn't light Shabbos candles. In the same home. It wasn't like she didn't light. She chose not to light Shabbos candles. And when he was 14, he was not bar mitzvah. When he was 14, he became curious to understand what he doesn't believe. He knew he didn't believe, but he wasn't satisfied just not believing. He had to know what it is he didn't believe in. He started to study. First they put on tefillin, he was 14 years old. He went to yeshiva for a few weeks when he was 16. Whatever, his story is fascinating. Fascinating. I don't give a whole history of his whole life story now. But here's a kid who went to college, who grew up not religious, didn't have a bar mitzvah, didn't have any kind of formal Jewish education, who even after he started becoming religious, took him many years, the whole long story, he was in the Negev in the south and with different people, and he got a college degree and he became a principal in the school down in the south in the Negev. And then he made that commitment to become a rabbi, to become fully religious, to grow his beard, and he worked day and night, day and night. One of the hardest working people. He had a yeshiva. He was involved in lecturing all over the world. He was involved with the Russian community. He spoke in Russia hundreds of times, and he opened up centers for Russian immigrants to teach them how to learn. He had a full-fledged yeshiva. He was a Rosh Yeshiva, a yeshiva, that was his yeshiva. He was writing numerous books. He was involved with so many projects. Other projects, so many things. So many things. And you want to hear the story? My favorite story. And I've seen this video many times where he says the story, and it gets me every time. He says he wrote to the Rebbe, it was 1990. And the last time he got an answer from the Rebbe. He was involved in 3 major projects at the time. Major projects, each one was a full-time job in and of itself. Writing the Talmud is a full-time job. People that wrote a few volumes are working day and night, Art's going to have like a whole team of people we're doing the Talmud. He has yeshiva. He's involved with the Russians. He's involved with immigrants. He's involved in the Israeli society. He's involved in many, 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 many things. Many things. He was a professor in Hebrew University. He was all over. Genius of a man, but there's many geniuses who are geniuses, but that's all they are. They're geniuses. He worked day and night. He didn't sleep. He was completely dedicated to his work. And he wrote to the Rebbe to ask which of these projects he should drop. It became too much. 3 full-time projects, each one requiring a full-time job. And he asks the Rebbe, and he describes each project, why it's so important, why he's doing it himself, why it takes so much time. Each one, why they're all important, they're all good. What should he stop? What should he try? You know the Rebbe answered him? No, that's not what the Rebbe answered. The Rebbe didn't answer none. The Rebbe said you should keep on all 3 projects and take on something else also. And when he says this story, it's like a tear in his eyes. And that was the last message the Rebbe gave me. He kept all 3 projects. He finished all of his projects. And he took something else. You understand? He grew up in a Marxist Zionist home. He grew up in a home where he didn't get a bar mitzvah. He grew up in a home where they didn't lay Shabbos candles. They didn't celebrate. They had a Pesach Seder. His grandmother was. But that's the kind of home he grew up in. Now, obviously, he was a very talented person. But that's not why he became one of the greatest rabbis of the century. That's not why he was able to translate the entire Talmud all by himself from Aramaic to Hebrew. Without giving up on any part of the Talmud. The Rebbe gave him a whole way of not to simplify, but to explain. So he didn't skip anything. The Tanya. People write Talmud, they don't know Chassidus, Kabbalah. He wrote one of the most famous books on Kabbalah in English, The 13 Petaled Rose. It's a bestseller. I think it's translated into 6 or 8 languages. It's a very, very good book, The 13 Petaled Rose. It's a book of Kabbalah, explaining Kabbalistic ideas in coherent. He knew everything. But the reason why he was able to do what he did is not because he was a genius. There's many geniuses. Because he was the first one up in the morning and the last one to sleep at night. He had commitment to what he was doing. He had commitment. And this, my friends, is a lesson for us. This is a lesson for us. It's very easy to say, I can't because it's not the way I grew up. I don't have the connections. I don't have the lineage. I'm not from an important family. Moshe's sons will get the position. Moshe's sons don't carry on Moshe's dynasty because Moshe's sons were not committed. They showed up to yeshiva, they weren't committed. Yehoshua was committed. He was committed. I just popped my head. I was in the office and I saw a sign that said, dreams are more important than excuses, or dreams way more than excuses. He was committed, and because he was committed, there was nothing he couldn't achieve. And that is the lesson for every one of us. If we're willing to work hard, and willing to stay the course, and have the grit and perseverance we need to overcome, there's nothing we can't do. We can become the next leader of the Jewish people. We can become the next Joshua. We just need to try hard. Okay, my friends? That's the story of Yehoshua. I want to say one last thing. When Joshua was born, I want to end with this. So the Medrash says, Vivi, when Joshua was born, no one took note that he was born. I'm quoting you a Medrash. When Joshua was born, no one noticed. No one knew he was born. However, when he died, all of Israel took note. Understand? And they were mourning him properly, whatever. And therefore, because they were mourning, Hashem himself was mourning. Hashem sought to make the whole world quake, as it is written. They buried him north of the Mount of Eruption. Hashem made an earthquake. When Joshua died, not only did Hashem make that, not only was everyone mourning the death of Joshua, the whole world noticed. The whole world noticed that there was an earthquake at that time. He was born, no one noticed. When he died, the whole world noticed. Understand? That's the story, my friends. Okay. Laila Tov.